Hey, so I hope everything went well last night with your projects. Um, the collections and synonyms project, that was a little bit more abstract, but it gives you good experience working with input from the user in Android and a few other things that are going to be helpful for you. And then also dealing with arrays, specifically multidimensional ones. Today is what you've all been waiting for. We are past all the Java stuff that we need to deal with for now. But right now we're doing pure Android. No Replit today. Everything's going to be in Android. So make sure you have Android Studio launched. You have your virtual device or physical device, whatever testing environment you have. Make sure that's all connected up and ready to go. And we're going to be building activity layouts. So you've already been doing this by adding your text views and things to the layout, but we're going to dig into what a layout is and how to design it in such a way that it looks good. So let's check that out. So upon completion of this module, you'll be able to know what a layout is and how to use it, to be able to understand the difference between views and view groups. You'll be able to use views and view groups to arrange a layout, and you'll be able to create multiple layouts for the same activity. So we're going to do all of those things today, and we'll play around with that and see how that goes. But our project today is you'll build a single page app that will display some static content, some content that you hard code in your XML file, and it won't change. You have the repo that we'll look in at the end. And then for the challenge, we'll have you add the data to your UI programmatically. It's just repeating what you've already done, but it will be doing it on a larger scale with more elements. So let me show you an example of what I put together. So this is an example of what I put together. I don't want you to match this. I want you to be creative and use your creative license to use different things. But we'll be talking about all these different components as we see, and then you can see if I rotate that, it rotates the screen. And it changes the way it's all laid out. So that's what we're working on today, and by the end of the day, you'll be able to build something like this and even cooler things. This is all, you're going to be flexing your design muscles, which will be really great. So let's get started on that. So our first objective is to know what a layout is and how to use it. So layouts are a hierarchy of nested views and view group objects with a single top-level parent. They're defined in XML files. So you can see here, and then the way these things are indented, you can also see how it's nested. So you have your top-level parent object, your parent view group. It has a child view group that has other content, another child, and then another component. And you use these, you nest them, you change them around to make it so that they will lay out how you want. So what we're going to do tonight is I'll walk you through each of the different layouts, show you what they do, and at the end we should have time to build a layout together. Build at least a basic one, which will be pretty cool. We can do some cool things with that. Once your layout XML file is defined, it's attached to the activity using the set content view command. And in fact, that command is added by default when you create a new activity. It's one of the first commands in your onCreate method. You can also define multiple versions of the same layout that will allow you to do different layouts for different screen sizes, different orientations, and all those different things. And we'll see how to do that as well today. One more thing you can also do is, in addition to adding things in your XML view, you can also add them programmatically at runtime. If you remember from our lesson last night on collections, the demo at the end showed us how to generate a text view, customize it programmatically, and then add that to our view. And that's another way you can add things. You still need to have your skeleton in the XML, but when you add them programmatically, it gives you a bunch of additional benefits and features beyond just having it being programmatically. And then there are cool things that you can do even beyond that when you go into list views, list adapters, and we do that week 2 of the course. So let's look at the difference between view groups and views, and then we'll dig into a sample project, or just start working through samples. So views are components of the user interface. They're also known as widgets. So things like your buttons, your text view, or your edit text components. And in fact, what we can see, well, you can see that when we build up our, when we work on our demo, we can see the different options that you have there. View groups, as opposed to views, are another type of view that holds multiple views inside of them. So view groups are still views, but they have the additional benefit of being able to hold more views inside of them. And we'll see that as well. And the group is a view that defines how the groups of views inside them are arranged. So some of the most common ones are the linear and relative layouts, and they give you a lot of control over the view. You also have a table layout, which is a grid of rows and cells. What we're going to be going over today is linear layout and relative layout, as far as those layout views are concerned. So views have attributes that control how they appear and behave, like the text or color attribute. So let's look at that in our, I'm going to bring up the documentation for that. See that right here. This is for just a standard view. So all views have these components. And if we go into our XML attributes, you can see all of these. You can have a background tint, foreground. Remember, we've dealt with the ID before all the time. You can add an on-click. You can add padding. We did that a little bit yesterday. And just all these different things that you can add to the views. And then if you get down deeper into it, let's look at specifically a text view. So a text view is a view. Let's see, we want to go Android widget text view. Let's go here. So this is the text view button type. Let's just do edit text. There you go, there's our widget edit text. So you can see here how it is, this is an explanation of what it is. And you can scroll down, you can see the different constructors if you're building them programmatically. But you can also scroll down, we want to find our XML attributes. There you go, inherited XML attributes. So here's some of the, so an edit text is also a text view, and in fact, if we click this, we should be able to get to our text view. But we have these attributes as well. So the height, the width, all these other attributes that you can set to manipulate how these look to us. And then here's our text view that have those as well. So those are just some of the ways that you can manipulate the views to make them look how you want them to look. So these are all the views, and then they have all those attributes that we can manipulate them with. So now let's go into Android Studio. Let's create a new project. We'll start a new Android Studio project. We're just going to go Layouts, Demos, and follow along with me. So make sure you have a new project that you're ready to work on. Okay, so now our project's ready to go. One thing you can do too, so it's building it in the background. Once it's done building it, we'll do some more stuff with that too. Remember, we're going to address that bug. It might just be in my build, but if I go into styles here and change this to base, you can see as we manipulate the text. I'm also going to execute the app right now, because that will allow us to, it'll just do a lot of the building in the background, so next time we run it, it'll be faster. So it's going to build up our preview. So let's look at a couple of these. Again, let's change this. We'll just manipulate this right now. First, we can get rid of these. And if we click down here at the bottom where you see design, this will open up the design view. Make sure I'm zooming in on all of these so everyone can see them all right before I forget. So here's your design view. And if I click on this text view, it'll show all of its attributes. If you don't see all the attributes, you can click up here and that'll show you, it'll toggle between all attributes and just the favorite ones. So if I click here, I can see all these different attributes that I have. So if I click this and I click the dots here, I can click color, then Android, and I can see all our Android colors. So if I click orange, okay, set the background to be orange. Then I can just click that. I just click here, it'll click the text, and I can just delete it and push enter to get rid of that. If I come down, I can look for text color. See if I can find that. Here's our text color. So if I click that, I can change the color of the text. I can click this and it'll change the color of the alignment. Click here, click that drop down, and then here's are some of the different options that I can have as far as aligning that goes. I didn't even notice this was here. So all caps, that's a true or a false. So if I just click that, you can see how it changes that. Changes your text to be all capital letters. And in fact, here it shows us the input. There's kind of the skeleton there. And there it's your all caps. So there are all these different things that you can add and use to manipulate your views. And you can also see over here all the different views that we have access to as well. And these are just kind of the default views. You can see this download symbol. So these are additional libraries that you have to download. We're working with the recycler view week 2 of the project as well. But if I want to add a view, I can click and drag it here. Then it's going to ask me to select a drawable since I selected an image view. If I select that, there it's going to place that image. You can see here it's not constrained, so it's not going to be at the right place. So if I come back here, this is giving it an absolute position. So that's one of the things I'm not super fond of with that design view, is adding things programmatically. I do better with that. And if I change this to just be a linear layout, then it'll lay it out how I want to. And this is one of the things where experimenting is going to be very, very helpful in just learning how things go, how things look if you set certain attributes and things like that. So let's check out specific views. So now we're going to use views and view groups to arrange a layout. So what we'll do is we'll look at the different view groups and one special view, then we'll see how they work, and at the end we'll build something together. So here we go. This is a linear layout. We've used these a lot. In a linear layout, child views are stacked on top of each other, either vertically or horizontally, as defined by us, the developers, in the order that they're defined. So remember, when we did vertical, all the elements we added it from the top down. It just kept adding and adding and adding. We can set the layout weight attribute to manage how the children are sized relative to each other. And that's a cool thing to play around with too. It gives you a lot of power with that. And by adjusting the weight, the highest weight will get the most space. So let's look at this. Let's bring it up and we'll play around with the linear layout. So now we already have a linear layout. By default, it's horizontal, as many of you ran into. So let's change this. We're going to change the width. In order to use weight, we need to change the width to 0 dp. And then we add a weight attribute and set that to be 1. And you can see here over on our preview that it automatically populated this whole thing. So what it did is, since we don't have a weight here, this will just be the volume that we tell it to. So we said wrap content, so it's the size of our image. And then this scaled up to fit all that extra space. So if I were to change this to 0 dp, you'll see it disappear for a minute. And if I change that weight and I set it to be 2, so now our view takes up all of this space. And in fact, what I can also do with an image view, if I do scale type and I say fit center. Nope, not fit. Let's try this again. Scale type. So these are all the different options that we have. So if I go fit start, there we go. So if I fit start, it goes to the beginning. Fit end will go to the end, and it can fit around that way. I'm going to manipulate that a little bit more later on. But you can see here, and if I change this to be orientation vertical, well, now it's vertical, and nothing's appearing because what we're doing is our width is tiny, but the weight is now going vertically. So if I change the width to wrap content, and then here I do my width to wrap content, then we should see everything back up to where it's at. And then we can use these things to manipulate how everything looks. So that's a linear layout. Let's look into a relative layout. So relative layouts organize widgets in positions relative to each other. What you do is you use the ID to set the anchor element, and then it can be placed above, below, to the right of, or to the left of. This allows for both vertical and horizontal positioning in a single layout. So let's check that out. So if we go back into here, sorry, I need to find Android Studio. There it is. So what I'm going to do here now is we're at a vertical layout. So let's do this. We're going to set our text size. Whoops. Size, if I can. And I hope you're following along so you can kind of play around with this. You don't have to type exactly what I'm typing. Just experiment as we're working on this so you can kind of see how everything's going. So let's do that. We're going to set our width to be matched parent since we're doing vertical. And then our height's going to wrap the content. Now let's set a relative layout. And they're interchangeable. We could put the top one to be relative or the bottom one to be the relative. It doesn't matter. Our height, we're going to use weight on this because our relative layout is a member of it's a child of the linear layout. We can use its weight to fill everything up. So what if I do 8? So you can see here, because this has the highest number, it fills the space relative to that. So that's really cool because it doesn't automatically push everything out of the way. These have weight, so it's going to give them some space. And as you play with the numbers, it'll scale. Like this one still has space. This one doesn't have as much space. Well, actually, if you look at it, it's about the same, but that's because it has content inside of it already, whereas the relative layout doesn't. So as you manipulate and play with those numbers, you can see different things and different how everything's laid out a little bit differently, and you can fine tune it the way you want. So what I'm doing here is I'm deleting our closing tag, and I'm going to add one down here. So you just open up the tag and do a /, and I'm going to highlight this, and if I push tab, now we get that nice indentation. Another thing you can see too is as I go further into this nest, it will change. It'll show me how far I am down here, and if I just click that, it'll go back to the different levels. So you can quickly navigate when you have these really long, and XML files can get really long, especially with these layouts, as we'll see when we do the example project at the end. So we have our image view here. It has an ID. That's an image view. So let's add a button. It's going to match the parent. Actually, no, we're going to wrap the content on that. You can see they're on top of each other right now because in a relative layout, you have to tell it relative to where it's at. So if I say right, whoops, to end of. So to end of supports languages that are right to left. Give it the ID, we'll just do image view. I'm also going to give this button an ID. Doesn't have to be anything good. And let's add a text view. So we go into, we will take our width, we're going to wrap our content again, but this time we're going to go below our button. You can see it's now below our button. Let's give it some text so we can see it. I am here. So you can see it's below the button, but it's still to the right, just still to the left. So what if we go end of image view? So there we go. So now we're telling it exactly where we want it to be. We want it to be below the button and at the very end of the image view. So then as we scale up our image view, so if I change that width to be 150, you can see it's pushed everything over because I told it where I want it to be. And those are just, that's how you can manipulate and use a relative layout. Then you can also, if I were to duplicate this with Control D, you can see again, sorry, that's all off, how it's, now it's duplicated, it's weighted, so it's going to take up the weighted space, and they're still there. It doesn't like this because we have two, you have to make sure that you don't have the multiple IDs, so we'll just undo that and get rid of it. So that's your relative layout. Let's jump in, and before we get to something else, I saw that we had a couple of questions. So it seems like the PMs are kind of addressing some of the questions. I'll go back and look at them and direct message you if anything that's specifically an issue, and we can look at that. And I will definitely make the text launcher. That's one of my biggest things that I'm trying to get better at. So now let's look at the scroll view, and then we're going to jump back in and look at everything. So scroll view is really cool. It allows views to be larger than the actual viewport, than the target display, and then users can scroll down to see the rest of the layout. It allows developers to spread out their information and utilize the space and maximize the look of everything. So let's look at this and see. So we can jump back into Android Studio, and I'm going to zoom in. I got all the files except for the one we're actually working in. And now we're going to add a scroll view. With the scroll view, the thing to remember, and we're going to go 0 to P again, and we're going to add a weight. The thing to remember with the scroll view is that it will only accept one child because it's technically not a view group. Actually, I mean, it is. But the way it works, it can only accept one child. So you have to put another view group inside of it. So if I just do a linear layout, match the parent, and wrap the content. So here we go. We have our linear layout there. If I just go here, we'll go a text view. We're going to wrap our content. No, this is going to wrap our content. I'm just going to fill the parent. Match the parent. Fill parent is an old way of doing it. And then the text, just to show an example, I'm going to jump back into our Sagan ipsum. And you can use lorem ipsum is just a term for generated text. And then there are additional websites. There's Pirate Ipsum and other ones that you can do. But the text is generated just as a placeholder. It's used generally for typesetting. And that's effectively what we're doing here. So I just paste this text here. There's a lot of text there. And let's build this app so we can see how that lays out with the scroll view. And generally, you're not going to have a big block of text in your XML files. So it's building, it's installing. So you can see our layout. We got our title text view up here. We have our image view over here that's bigger. We have the button, and these are all weighted all differently. And then this is our block of text. And you see what the scroll view allows you to do is allows you to make stuff bigger. It doesn't have to be a single element like we have here. I could add another text view if I just duplicate that and change that to be just something so that we can see that it gets to the next view. We'll bring up our emulator again. Now we'll scroll down. You can see, wow, that got really wonky really fast. Scroll all the way to the bottom. That's interesting that it did that. That's kind of wonky. The scroll view will generally wrap what we want it to wrap. Oh, again, I made the mistake of orientation vertical. That was probably what our issue was. If I build that really quick. We jump back into our emulator now. There you go. That's much better. And you can see the second view down here. So what you can do is what we did, again, yesterday, when we added a bunch of text views programmatically, and we added them to the scroll view, it allows us to see all that and have it scroll through. So the last thing we're going to do before we work on that project, just adjust the seat a little bit, we can create multiple layouts for the same activity. So mobile users don't always use the phones in the same way. Sometimes we'll do different orientations, different screen sizes is really big in Android. Different languages will sometimes read right to left, which is why you use end instead of to the end of instead of to the right of. You have the night mode. You have a lot of other things you can set up. What we have to do as developers, we have to make sure our apps look great in all of these situations. So in order to do that, we can define layouts for different situations, and then Android will pick the one that we tell it to for those situations. So let's jump in and we'll create a landscape layout. So if I go into my project, you go down to layout, you right click that, and you go new layout resource file. Your file name needs to be the same as the file name that you're replacing. So in this case, it needs to be activity main. And that way, Android will know, okay, I need to look for activity main, but if I'm in landscape, I need to pick the landscape one. So here we can see all the different things that you can set, which is really cool. But here's orientation. So that's what I want to set the orientation to. And you can also see, okay, do we want this to be for portrait, for landscape, or for square displays? In this case, I want it to be for landscape. So I'll create that. There you go. It gets us into our design view, but let's jump into the text because text is better. We're going to add a text view, match, just fill it up. And we'll say text in landscape mode. And then if I build that, I'll pop back into here. While it's building, you can also see, so we have both of those. And so our layout, instead of being the activity main XML, it is now another directory. So it's showing me that I have the main, the standard one, and then this one is main land. So if I right click this and show an explorer, it's going to bring up a explorer or a finder window right there, hidden somewhere. It brings it up and it shows me that it's actually in a separate directory. So let's get back to our demo here, and if I rotate this, give it a second, there you go, now you're in landscape mode. If you used a newer API, you'll see a symbol here when you rotate. You'll just have to click that to get it to rotate, or you can scroll down and click your rotate setting to enable auto rotate. So if we go back, it'll go back to our other layout. And generally they're going to have the same content, and we're going to see that when we work on our demo right now. So let's jump into that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close this. Actually, in fact, we can just use this same project. I'm going to delete this file. That'll save us some time. So if I delete this, no, delete anyway. There we go. So now we're gonna get to our main.xml file. And again, I apologize that I had not zoomed in that file. I don't know why it makes me do that for each one. It just doesn't like that. So we're gonna delete all these except for our linear layout there. So what I wanna do now is I wanna pop into our example. So these are your instructions for your project. And what I want to do is, what I want you to do is you're going to pick something from any of these databases, NASA images, movies, video games. So if I click this one, I can open that in a new tab. And we can see this is an example of, this is an image. This is data about this image. And then there's different versions of the image that you can get. What I want you to do is I want you to pick an image and 6 more pieces of data, and I want you to build a layout around that shows that data. The purpose of this is so that later on in the course, and then also generally, your apps will access data that's on the internet. That's going to be just a big standard thing that's done. And these links that I gave you are free APIs, which is application programming interface, which means that we can write an app that communicates with their database, pulls information down, and can display it to our user. So that'll give them, so you'll have multiple pages and they do multiple things, but what we're doing just now is I want you to just pick something either from here, or you can pick another type of data if you would like. And I want you to pick something that has an image and has 5 to 6 or more pieces of data that you can use. And I want you to use a linear layout, a relative layout, an image view, and a scroll view. And then you'll have to use multiple text views. So in our demo now, I want to use this TV shows link is really good because it has multiple images that you can use. So I want to do that. What we're going to do now, I'm going to take this link and I will paste it in chat. So I want you to go to that link, and we're going to build a Stranger Things app page. So I'm going to move this over here, bring that up. Move that over there. Get that to scale where we want it. Try to take advantage of that. The text is a good size now. We'll bring that. You can also, another thing you can do here in your editor is you can click that and select different screens. And it'll show you how it looks on a different screen. So if I do the Pixel 2, which is the same as our emulator, I can see that. The Pixel's slightly different. So you can do that to kind of see and preview your app and your layout. So I want you to follow along with me. So make sure you're at this state. You have a new app project, and it's just a blank layout right now with a linear layout on top. Somebody asked about comments before. Oh, I apologize. The link was posted to all panelists and not all attendees. There you go. So I was the only one that could see the link, but there you go. There's your link. You can navigate to that and view it. So what I want we're going to work together, and let's pick. Feel free to put in comments on this. I'm going to try and keep an eye on the chat as much as I can. In fact, I'm going to move it over to here so I can see that a little bit better. But we want to figure out, let's look at this page and decide what pieces of data we want. What are some 5 or 6 pieces of data that we want to show our users? Obviously, we want a title. We want to have a banner image. What are some of the things else that we want that you guys can see? I think our users would also want to know the status as far as, yeah, that would be good. The status, whether or not it's continuing. It's going to be really important. I think that they would want to know the network as well, because that's going to be really important. Where can they watch it? I mean, really, all of these would be good. Yeah, rating could be good as well. Let's grab something that we can throw into a list. So let's look at seasons and episodes. So what we can do is we can do seasons, and then inside of that we'll put the list of episodes. We'll grab the air date, and I think that's good. That gives us 2, 4, 6, 7, 8 pieces of data, so we might not use all of these. Now let's look at it and think about the order we want it, and then also which of these will need a label. If I just throw a date there, it's not going to know anything. So if I put a label, I know that I have to have a text view that's dedicated to, that is hard-coded to say air date. Status, if we say continuing, I think that's going to be clear enough to the user. Network could go either way. If it's something like Netflix, that would be pretty clear. But if it's, some people could be confused if it says sci-fi or something else like that. That might be something to consider. Rating, let's give that a label as well. And then we'll come back up here. And then these ones are pretty, I mean, season is going to be season 1 or season 2. Episodes, they'll have the episode name, and I think that would be clear enough to the user. So now that we've seen all of these things, let's start building our layout. So this is vertical, so we know that we're building it in a portrait mode. So first, let's create our text view. The width, it's vertical, so I want to match the parent. I want to wrap the content. The text value, I want to just be the title. And this is where your hard-coded is. So this is now a hard-coded string that's going to be there all the time. And that doesn't look like much of a title. So what we can do is, let's give it a size. So if we go text size, and the way you do text size in Android is you use SP, which is a scalable pixel. And that's kind of equivalent to your font size in Word or something like that. So we got our text size. Let's give it something else. Let's give it a style. And we're going to change that. Oh, we don't want just style. Sorry. We need text style. There it goes. And we want bold. And there we go. And then finally, let's do alignment. And we're going to center that. So again, make sure you're following along. So we have our hard-coded string. And that's starting to look like a title. Next, let's do an image. In order to do that, we need an image view. Our width is going to wrap our match our parent, so I'm going to have the image span across the side, and the height's going to wrap the content. And now what we need to do is we need to get our image. So let's go onto the website and see if there are any images that we would like to use. So that could be a good one, that title image there. There's all these here. This could be good because it's a banner that would go on the top, but it wouldn't be necessarily good to go if they're in landscape mode. A poster could be decent in landscape mode. Let's go with this one because that gives us a good landscape. And then you remember it's good wide, but also on narrower screens, we can crop that and that still looks like a good image. So I'll go ahead and download that. I will show that in folder. And that brought it up over here. So there's the downloads folder. Go here and I right click. So what we need to do is we need to put it in our drawable resources. Show in Explorer. Is it going to pop up? Oh, there we go. That's what it was before. The windows were so tiny. It's an itty bitty window that popped up. So we go drawable. And what we want to do is we'll just drag this over. So we're just moving that into our drawable directory. And now you can see, minimize that, close that. A drawable directory just populated. There's our image. So let's compress that. Move this over so we can use our real estate a little bit more efficiently. So now our image, we're going to go source, SRC. And drawable, and here's our drawable we just got. That's giving us an error though. let's see, Control F1. I apologize, I can't scale this part. The resource name must begin with a character. So this is an invalid resource name. So let's go back into our project. We're going to right-click that, refactor, rename. And we're going to rename that to a character poster. And then we can go ahead and refactor that. Let's bring that back. And now we're going to change this to be character poster. And there's our image. But now our image takes up the whole window there. Image view gives us a few different tools that are helpful with that. First, we have our scale type. The same thing we did before. I want to fit center. In fact, if I do scale, if I center crop, it'll zoom it up to fill it, and then it'll crop it. And in fact, it's not necessarily zooming it. It's just kind of making it that size that it needs to be. It fills it vertically, I believe. But if I just change that to center, if I fit center, now it's going to fit this window. And then I can use adjust view bounds true. And there you go. What that does is it'll fit it in center. And instead of the view wrapping it vertically all weird, it will adjust the bounds. So it adjusts, you saw the blue boundary to fit what we wanted it to fit. So there we go. There's our picture. There's our image. Remember, they're appearing in order. And then below, we can go, let's start putting our data in. So now we have our title. We have our banner image. Maybe we want to put the status up top. So let's move status. If I Control Shift up and down, you can move things around. Our network date is fine. That's the first air date. Rating. I think these would be good, and then everything else can fit in its own thing. But let's see how those look. So if I go, so for these ones that need a label, so the first one doesn't need a label. Let's go ahead and we'll just put text view, wrap. We're gonna give it text, and it's gonna be continuing. And you can see that's right there. And we can manipulate that as we go, kind of see what we want to do with that. What we could do, what if we have the network and then the status on the same line? Because that's saying it's continuing and you can watch it on Netflix. That's kind of intuitive to the user, but we can't do that with just the text view. So what we're going to need to do is we need to add a relative layout. So relative layout, the width is going to match the parent. The height's going to wrap the content. Go with that. Now we're going to take our text view. We're going to cut that. We're going to paste it, add it into here. So there's that. And now we need to give it an ID because it's in a relative layout. And if we want something to be relative to that, we'll just do status. The type isn't as necessary here because we're not, I guess we are going to be dealing with it programmatically, so we don't need that. So there's our text view. There's our other text view. We're going to do wrap and wrap. Text, and we'll just say Netflix. And you can see it's on top of each other. So what we need to do is we need to do end of, so layout to end of. And you can just select text status. And there you go. But they're all they're on top of each other and they're not really centered where we want them. So let's do this. Let's change our relative layout to a linear layout. That gives us access to our weight. So if I do layout weight and give that a 1, and I do this, I need to do layout weight and give it a 1. So now they have equal weights. And then we'll change our width to be 0. And the reason why you change the width to be 0 is so it doesn't have to do 2 calculations. It speeds up your app. If you have it to wrap content, it'll say, okay, I'm going to wrap the content. And then it sees the weight and says, oh, well, I need to stretch it out. But if you do 0, it just says, okay, 0, and then wait. And then both of these, one thing we can do too, let's avoid having to type things twice. Highlight something unique inside of it. Oh, that doesn't have an ID. They need to Both have IDs. I do the layout weight. This is unique to both of them. And now I have two cursors, Alt J or Option J. That should work. And then I can do align, text alignment, center. So now these are both centered. And let's make them both bigger. So I'll make them size. And let's do, so the title was 36. So what if we make these 18 SP? So that's looking better. One last thing is we want to make sure that they don't sit right on top of that image. So if I add some padding to it and give it, if we give it 5 dp, that gives it enough that it has its space and can do its own thing. So now we have these. Let's build our rating and our air date. And in fact, we could duplicate that, or we could have it go vertically. And that's really up to you. That's where the fun part of this assignment comes, is designing it. And also the challenge is figuring out what looks good and what we would like. Let's just do a linear layout. And we'll just do match, wrap. And in fact, we can just copy and paste these. Actually, grab one that doesn't have an ID on it. Paste that. We don't need this. And in fact, that's not needed up here either. This is going to be our, we did decide that these both needed labels, right? That's something to consider. Rating and air date both need labels. So what we can do is, that's continuing. Let's do this. So we'll duplicate that. So now this is horizontal. Where this is going to be rating. Our label doesn't have to be as big, but it should be still viewable. And this is going to be, let's go back to our database. Continuing Netflix, rated TV 14. TV 14. So this doesn't look good centered because these each have to be separate components, because we're going to have to adjust this one programmatically. You can just append stuff to the text view, but it doesn't necessarily work as well when you're trying to do other things. So having them be separate is generally a good practice. So we don't want to be centered. We want that to be start, text start. Does that work? Yeah, there we go. So we're using our start. And then we want this alignment to be start as well. And the spacing is a little off. So what if we do, let's do something. Let's take this layout, how we have it, and then we're going to nest it inside something else. So I'm going to cut it so we still have that. I'm going to do a linear layout. And this is going to match wrap. And now if I paste that, I paste it again, we need to adjust this to be a wrap of the content. And this needs to wrap the content as well. We're going to get rid of our weight, or removing our weights. Delete those weights. This is going to be wrap content. This is going to be wrap content. And now we're going to do, our weight is going to be 1. This is going to be 0 dp. And this one's weight is going to be 1. And the width is going to be 0. So there we go. That's looking better. We need to get rid of our weights here as well. So I think that looks pretty good. Let's change our content here. This is going to be the, first air date. And we can just copy and paste that value over here. And there we go. We can manipulate kind of how these things are laid out, but I think it looks really good right now. It's a little bit small, so we might want to make our labels a little bit bigger. So if I bump that up to a 16, and then bump this up to a 16, that might look a little bit better. But then that's a little bit too, that doesn't fit very well, especially with that date. So if we go back to 14, back to that 14. Okay, I'm going to stop for a second and give everybody a little bit of time to catch up. You can see there's our text for both of these. That's how it's all built out. And I'm just looking at the chat as well. If you run into the failed to load one or more classes error, it's generally going to be in your styles file, and you change that to base. Seems like that's a bug with this version of Android Studio, but you change that, and as far as my experience, it has fixed it. That's just a recent bug that they have there. So we'll give it a few more seconds for everyone to catch up. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add our seasons. So up here we're going to have our text view. Remember that's in our first wrap. Match wrap. Do we want to do that? Let's see how that looks. So we set our text to be seasons. And so that's another thought too, is do we want to have a label for the section of seasons, or is it enough for me to say season 1 and then have the stuff below it? That's something to think about. I think if we do seasons and then we give it a good size, like 24, and then we go align center, I think that'll be good for us to say, okay, this is the section for seasons. And then we can have another linear layout, and this will allow us to have a separate weight. And TV show stuff can get pretty complicated, especially if you're doing basic stuff, because they have multiple seasons and each one can be a little bit different. So don't feel like you have to fit every single season in there. Let's go. Just going to take this same text view. Going to paste that. This is going to be season 1, and that's going to be 14. Alignment we don't need. That's interesting. Oh, because our width is wrapping content, we need to match our content on our linear layout, match parent. And I don't necessarily want that to be centered. So what if we just do start? That way you have seasons, and then you have season 1 down here. And then inside of this as well, first I want to add a weight. That can just be 1. Height can be 0. I want to add a scroll view now. Having so much fun. I'm getting so distracted with all this. I didn't realize that we're getting so close. We'll just add these, and then we'll build our landscape layout, which is going to be much quicker. Our height, we will wrap our content, match our parent. Do we want to match the parent? We need to change our orientation to vertical. Let's see how that works. I think that'll overwrite our text here. But we're going to go here. We'll go boop. We can copy this again because it's going to be really similar. And instead of being season 1, whoops, we'll delete that. We're going to make this be 18 again. So it's a little bit bigger. It's inside of our scroll view. Oh, inside of our scroll view, we need to cut that. We need to put our linear layout. Match, wrap. And then it needs to be vertical. Nope, not the orientation, vertical. Paste that there. So now let's jump in and we'll look at season 1. Okay, so we have all of these. That's not very cleanly written, but what we can do is if I copy this, we can use the powerful editing capabilities in Android Studio. So if you just add a space down and you just paste that, you can see that's all there and it's lined up pretty good, but we have this excess stuff. So I can use this and go Alt-K, go to the, and then, delete everything at the beginning. So that's gone. And then I can look at our dates. The dates happen to all be the same here. I wonder if I go, so yeah, Alt-J, so I'm highlighting a tab here. So it's looking for all the tabs. We can delete that. And now we just have the titles. So Alt-K again, highlight that, and cut it. So now I have all of those things copied up. I know that there are 8 episodes, so I can come down here and I can create 8, highlight it, Control D, so that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I highlight our text. In fact, I just highlight this whole thing and do our Alt-J again. Make sure we don't go too far. There we go, we're good. And then I can Control Paste, and then I just added all those right now. So let's just check all of this, make sure we have everything that we want. This is our linear layout for all of those, and then text view for season, linear layout. Let's do this. Let's move our season 1 outside of here. That'll fix that. And then for all of these, let's make them a little bit, let's space them out a little bit more. So highlight your, oh, there's that extra one. Oh, that didn't paste everything. Let's see what happens if I do that. Do we still have everything? No, that's a little wonky. So let's undo this. I didn't highlight the right one was my issue. Okay, so that's outside of there. I'm doing that, so I'm gonna have to do this again really quick because I made a quick mistake. So if I highlight that, delete that. Alt-J to highlight the tabs. Delete that. Okay, make sure I have everything. Cut that. Come up here. I hadn't highlighted the very top. That was my issue. Alt-J, J, J, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that should give me 8. Now if I paste it, now we fill the whole thing. And meanwhile, while we have everything highlighted too, I can just add padding, but I'm gonna do padding at the top. And we're gonna do 15 dp. And there we go. So that we have those there. And now if I build this, it's going to do the build. I can put this here. So if you scroll, see, so now all that's static, and I can scroll up and down here to see all those things. So that's our scroll view. Now we can quickly pick a project. I right click, new layout, activity, main. We're going to select orientation, moving that over. It's going to be landscape. There we go. Go back to text. In fact, I'll just copy this again. Copy, paste. See, it doesn't line up how we want it to. I'm going to zoom in before I forget. So what we can do to quickly manipulate that, we have all the content here that we need. We just need to do some quick manipulation. That's going to be, and I'm going to give myself a limit of 5 minutes. Might not be able to do everything, but at least we'll get some of this stuff done. We want the title at the top, we want the inner image view, but the width, we don't want it to match. We want the width to wrap, and we want the height to match. Oh, we don't want that. We still want this vertical. But what we want here is we want to add another layout. Width to match. The height is going to be 0. And then the weight is going to be 1. So there's our linear layout. I'm going to delete this. I'm going to cut that. And now we're going to go all the way down to the bottom of this element. So I scroll all the way down here, and I can just add a linear layout right there. If I Control Alt L, that formatted it all for me. That's going to be horizontal. That's fine. Our linear layout here is going to wrap. In fact, that's going to be 0. Height's going to match. Weight is going to be a 2. And this weight is going to be a 1. See there, it's really small just because in fact, we don't need that anymore. Let's make that bigger so you can see this better. So you can see there, it's filled it out. Let's give this, just give it like 8 so they can more easily, oh no. That's interesting. 2. Width is going to be 0. Yeah. There's our weight. Height is going to match the parent. So what we want to do is we want to center crop. So we're going to wrap the parent. There we go. So that's looking pretty good. And this linear layout, that is just that one, isn't it? And you know what? I just reached my self-imposed limit. So what I would do here is I would wrap this in another layout. So I'll just, I can delete this. Width is going to, let's wrap content. I would do another linear layout here. If I can do this quickly, then we can be happy. 0. Do the same thing we did before. Cut, end, paste. So now we do there. Weight can be 4. See how that goes. Well, you can kind of see what we've done so far. I don't want to keep you any longer, but if we look at our main one, that ended up looking really good. We just have to manipulate our landscape one to fit this screen a little bit better. But that's what your assignment's going to be. We did get a few more pieces of data, but I want you to have fun picking something you're interested in. And then if you did have any issues, feel free to DM any of us to work through those issues with you. Let me just quickly make sure that we touched on everything for your project. Yep, use a combination of views and view groups. Use about a dozen or so components, or about 6 or so different pieces of data. And you need to build a portrait and a landscape view, and then make sure that they're named the same so you can swap between them. And then here's a couple tips with images. And the challenge is to add the stuff, give everything IDs, and add it programmatically. Thanks for sticking with it. Thanks for following along with the example. Hopefully that was helpful for you. Hopefully I didn't go too long. Let me just stop the recording.